All right, time for another update and forecast on the Palisades fire. It's up over 23,000 acres. We did have some growth throughout the day today. Pretty active morning, containment 11%. As we always talk about though, those numbers don't really actually tell us anything. So what we're going to do in this video is try to figure out where is the fire actively burning and where is it going to go in the future. Now right off the bat though, I will say, earlier today, if you're watching some of my live streams, it looked like a critical situation. And it looks as though some of that risk has subsided. But there is some, I'd say, not great things in the weather forecast that we're going to have to take a look at in a minute. But here's the Palisades fire. How this map works is basically those black lines represent the progression of the fire perimeter. So you can see how it's moved up towards the north here. And before we dive into this one too much, just in case you're wondering, like, where has it been active recently? Let's just show the gist of it. Anywhere where you see those red stars, that's where there's been growth in the last, or fire activity within the last 12 hours. So the majority of this fire isn't still actively burning. That's why when I say 23,000 acres doesn't really tell us all that much, is because out of this, maybe 20,000 of the acres don't even have those yellow stars on them. And the yellow stars are active fire within the last 24 hours. In other words, most of this fire hasn't seen fire in more than a couple of days, with the exception of this northern side right here. So the few spots we were watching the most closely today was on the north here, and then this spot right here that was pushing down to the south. So if we look over at this map, we'll be able to see actually the updated version of how far that fire has extended at this point, because earlier today we had some confusions. Oh, and it looks like they got some aircraft going right here, possibly dropping some retardant. We had some confusion earlier today because when we were looking at the heat signatures, it looked like it had gone over Mandeville Canyon. And that's why we don't trust the heat signatures all the time. They're not the most accurate source. What is going to be the most accurate source is these fire perimeter maps. And if we just click on it, it's going to show us when it's from. So this is from 11 a.m. this morning. So I'd like to have a more recent one, but I don't think there's been too much growth since then. But you can see how this progressed. So it moved up over this ridge, and then it was starting to push down into Mandeville Canyon. And if we zoom all the way in here, you're able to see how close it got to a lot of these structures down here. But as of right now, and the most recent fire perimeter data that we have to go off of, it doesn't look like it has actually pushed through Mandeville Canyon and taken out a lot of these structures. So that's good news there. The other spot we were watching closely today was down on the south right here, because you can see that orangish color right there. That's the most recent fire perimeter. So that's where the most recent growth will be from. And it stops like right before those structures. So pretty amazing work done. And we can actually see a view of what happened on the southern edge right here, and an example of some of the amazing work that they were doing. So this camera is going to be looking kind of this way, and then we're going to look at this camera from the south looking up this way. So pinpointing that spot right there, which matching up right with this is going to be right about there. So if we come over to our camera shot, this is the one coming from the west, looking over to the east as this fire tries to push down to the south like it was doing this afternoon. And this is what it looked like for 6 hours. So when I did my last live stream around, 10:30, 11 a.m., it was fairly active, and it looked like it was getting closer towards structures. But watch as you go later in the day, the smoke actually starts to diminish a little bit. And I wouldn't say that's because of the weather. The winds have actually been slightly picking up throughout the day, but look at all the retardant they are dropping on this fire. I mean, it's a little hard to see because it moves so quickly, but it seems like every half second in this video, there is another aircraft going through there dropping retardant. And you see, as we get to the most recent timestamp, I'm going to click it back to like right there. That is much diminished to when we compare it to this afternoon, when there was more smoke coming off of the fire. One thing I will say, these nighttime cameras always make it look a lot more intense than it actually is. I think it just has to do with, the photography or whatever you call it. But that is definitely a better situation than what we're looking at this afternoon. Now we can also check out the view from the southern end, because this is the one where it actually, you could see some of the structures getting close. So this one's down from Santa Monica looking up, and 6-hour time lapse right here. So this had a lot of smoke coming off it. This is a view from further away, so we're able to see a bit more of it. And then you can see some of that air attack. So now we're downwind. So this camera is a bit more hazy because the winds are coming from the north, trying to push the fire down towards the south. But you can still just see towards the end of this video that some of the smoke actually starts to settle down a bit, and it just looks like there's less smoke produced overall. So that, I would say, is also some good news. We also were thinking about this northern side as well, but what's interesting is, notice those orange dots, that's where the fire was active 12 to 24 hours ago. It seems like the orange dots are actually outside of the red dots. So the only explanation I can think of for that happening is that, there's two possible explanations. One is that a burning ember from the main fire traveled against the northerly winds. The winds are going like this, traveled against the northerly winds somehow, started a fire there, and then burned back into itself. So you had fire burning there 12 to 24 hours ago, and then more recent fire that got pushed by the winds. I would say what's the more likely scenario is that they saw this wind forecast and they decided to take advantage of it. So what they most likely did was they came up here, and maybe that's the previous fire perimeter shown before that black line right there. And I think we're piecing together the right information, because if you look at this, looks like a ridge line right here, and it looks like a road. It looks like it's maybe some kind of farmer road. So what they most likely did is they lit this ridge line on purpose. It's called like a firing operation. And then with the winds pushing down from the north, it takes that fire, pushes it back against itself. And then that connects with the previous fire perimeter. The reason they do that is because if this is where the fire is actively burning right here, then the last thing you want it to do is just move at its own pace towards all of these structures that we see up towards the north. So what they do is they light fire right along this ridge line, and then that fire burns back into the main fire. And then where the main fire is, all of these fuels have already been cleared out. So then the fire just sort of runs out of steam. So on that northern edge, we've seen heat detections there recently, but I would say those heat detections might actually be good news, that they're putting some good fire on the ground, clearing out the fuels to protect a lot of those structures towards the north. And just to look at some of the structures, I'll turn on perimeters only to make this a bit cleaner. Look at how many structures we have up towards the north here. So it makes sense that, and it's actually good that we had maybe this more favorable wind in order to hopefully make that northern side a bit more controlled. Now let's kind of get into what I'm still pretty concerned about. I would say if we zoom out right here and look at where there's been more recent heat, not too much concern on the western side, this whole portion here, or obviously much of where it's already burned, because I mean it couldn't get much worse in a lot of the air parts of this fire. I would say northern side I'm a bit more optimistic about, now that we've pieced that together, that it might have actually been a firing operation up there. I'd say my main concern is Mandeville Canyon, and then the areas south of where we saw some of the growth throughout the day today. So the reason I would say that is if we go to fire perimeters and we turn on structures, if you look at how close that fire perimeter is to all of those structures in Mandeville Canyon, that's definitely closer than you would want it to be, and that seems to be where the fire is still pretty active. And then we also have the fire where it seemed to be most active throughout the day, right about there, about as close as it could be to all of those structures. Again, right there, corresponds with what we're looking at on this map and our two different camera angles looking right there. So I would say these structures to the south, where the fire's been active right there and where a lot of that growth was today, and these structures in Mandeville Canyon. And then I would say secondary would be some of these structures up here on the higher elevations, because worst case scenario is if it were to get to the bottom of Mandeville Canyon, fire likes to move uphill because it's able to preheat the fuels and then evaporate the moisture so that by the time it gets to those fuels, they're already ready to combust. So if it does get to the bottom of this canyon here, it's going to be able to push up this side fairly quickly. So yeah, that's definitely something I'll be watching, but the fact that they're just able to stop it there today is pretty good news. Now, where some of the, I'd say, bad news comes in is honestly with the weather forecast. So if we come in here, this is going to be a bit technical, but then we'll try to break it down, make it a bit more simple. So red flag warning through Wednesday for gusty winds and low relative humidity over much of Los Angeles and Ventura counties. So high confidence in long duration critical fire weather conditions due to moderate to locally strong Santa Ana winds through at least Tuesday and likely through Wednesday for Santa Ana wind corridors of Los Angeles and Ventura counties. So right off the bat, I'd say I notice it says moderate to locally strong. That's not exactly what we want to see, but it's also not as bad as it was when the Palisades fire took off. That's about as, that would, if it was like that, they'd be using terminology more like extreme Santa Ana winds. But then if we look here, it says periods of winds gusting 30 to 50 miles per hour, except 50 to 75 miles per hour for wind-prone mountains and foothills through at least Tuesday, with the strongest winds likely into Sunday morning, and again late Monday into Tuesday. So it sounds like they're expecting the winds to pick up a little bit overnight tonight, and then Monday night into Tuesday morning. And we can check that on our map right here. So I tried to click kind of where I think this southern part of the fire would be, where one of our top concerns is. And let's see what happens to the wind. So right now it's saying 22 mile per hour gusts. As we go overnight, that actually shows the winds slightly decreasing. You notice how it goes from that orangish color to more of this greenish color. Then let's see if it picks up as we get into the morning. That's 1 a.m. That's 4 a.m. At that point, it doesn't look like it's decreased all that much, but it doesn't look like it's increased all that much either. If anything, it's gone slightly down. And then continuing to go slightly down until 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. So not exactly sure what they're seeing with the winds picking up Saturday night into Sunday morning. The only thing I could be thinking is that it's perhaps not exactly where we're focused on the Palisades fire. Maybe they're doing a wider forecast. Yeah, they said Los Angeles and Ventura counties. So they're most likely looking at, oh yeah, up here in the higher elevations, that's where you have some gusts really picking up overnight tonight. I could see some 35 to 50 mile per hour gusts going on up there. That's at least what the model is saying as well. So that might be more of a concern overnight tonight into tomorrow morning for new fires starting. But where, or maybe some of the old fires like flaring back up again, but where we're seeing the active growth on the Palisades fire, that actually looks like it's kind of sheltered from some of the strongest wind that we're getting. So interesting nuance to the wind right there. That's, if there's one word I could use to describe wildfire, it's nuance. There's a lot of that in the forecasting. I'm also curious to see what the humidity is doing, because I mean, winds didn't look all that bad last night, and then I woke up in the morning and the fire was extremely active, and the big part of the reason for that was because it remained so dry. So if we look overnight tonight, yeah, there's not a great relative humidity recovery. Into 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, we would like to see this number around 60-70%, but because the winds are still offshore, we're not getting that moisture moving in from the ocean. So the relative humidity is still in the low 20s, and then it most likely would drop down and even lower as we get into tomorrow afternoon. So still exceptionally dry. throughout the day tomorrow. If we look at the wind gusts tomorrow afternoon, looks kind of similar to what we had today. Even tomorrow evening, it looks actually calmer than what we had today. So tomorrow evening, they might get a little break to really try to attack this fire. But I would say based on some of the imagery that we looked at, that's what it looked like this afternoon. That's what it looks like now. Seems like they're already able to attack it fairly well. So I'd say Monday night, Monday night into Tuesday morning. I think the models actually look a little bit worse than the last time I looked at them. So Monday night into Tuesday morning, this is where they're saying there could be another strong Santa Ana wind event. Once again, it looks like there's some of that nuance. It might not be exactly where we've seen a lot of the activity on the Palisades fire recently. If we look up in these higher elevations, that's some 50 to potentially 60 mile per hour gusts going on up there. And some of that could have the potential to filter down into the Palisades fire area. So that's why I named this as my number one concern moving forward, because if we do get some of those stronger winds filtering into this area, that's going to be a lot harder than it was today to stop the fire from moving down into these spots. But if I know this, you know that CAL FIRE knows this, so you can imagine they're doing everything they possibly can to prepare Mandeville Canyon and these areas to the south for this event that is coming up. And it looks like they still have all sorts of aircraft flying over this area, just probably dropping retardant run after retardant run all over the place. So now just brief summary of that weather forecast. It says peaking in strength this evening and overnight. I don't totally know about that. The winds will be peaking overnight tonight in some parts, but it looks like over the most active part of the Palisades fire, it looks like winds don't appear to be changing all that much overnight. If anything, they might be dropping a little bit. And then a fire weather watch will begin 6 p.m. tonight and will remain in effect through Sunday night. Moderate to strong. This is like the summary. Santa Ana winds are likely to return Monday into Tuesday, and then now they're saying Wednesday as well. So we are far from over with this, but I mean, I have to say, pretty amazing work done on this fire throughout the day today. It could have ended a lot worse than how some of these maps have stopped at the structures, as we've just seen. And big part of the reason for that, 3,700 personnel on this fire right now. So you know they're going to be working hard overnight. With that being said, we do have 2 fatalities on this fire. I know there's thousands of structures destroyed. That right there says 5,000 structures. This is just for the Palisades, but I've also maybe seen some numbers that looked higher than that, so I'm not sure how recently that's been updated. If you're a local in this area and you haven't been able to move back into the fire perimeter because of evacuation orders and warnings, I'd imagine there is a lot of anxiety about like how has your house fared. So I finally found the damage assessment maps. So what you can do with these is you can zoom in, and they send out damage assessment teams as fast as they can, but you can imagine with a fire this big, it takes time. So they haven't completely surveyed the entire area, but what you're able to do is actually click into the street view, individual homes, and if it's red, it says it's destroyed. Orange is going to be major damage. Black is no damage. So this just shows how kind of there's some luck that comes into this kind of stuff. There's also things like how well your home was prepared for wildfire. But yeah, when we get an event like how the Palisades fire was spreading, there's probably more of that luck side of things. But what you can do is actually click on the home. A lot of times there'll actually be a photo, so then you're able to see like what that house looks like. So just seeing that's just one of the examples of the devastation that we've had on the Palisades fire. According to the weather forecast, looks like there could be some stronger winds again, mostly Monday night into Tuesday morning, and then we'll keep an eye on it tomorrow. But since it's Sunday, I'll be taking a day of rest, but I will be back on Monday to update before that Santa Ana wind event comes in Tuesday morning. So I hope this video was helpful. Thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who's been affected by this fire, and thanks for watching.